So maybe bringing it back, Ebehi, to the academic perspective, your research contemplates these exact topics. How are you finding there to be a difference in the way that the global trade environment is impacting larger firms like David's versus smaller firms and smaller organizations that you also study?
So speed of reaction is a very important point here, or speed of response, right? Given that trade policy is changing so frequently, maybe it makes sense to wait rather than to respond immediately. Because if the tariffs are going to be high today, but then low tomorrow, then do you really want to shake up your entire procurement process for something that's only temporary? And so the key difference between large businesses and small businesses is that small businesses have to respond a lot quicker, right? A lot more quickly than a large company. And why is that? They essentially have less of a financial buffer for absorbing these shocks, right? So there was a study, I think, from 2 or 3 years ago from the JP Morgan Chase Institute that actually quantified the average cash on hand to cover operating expenses for the average small and medium-sized business in the United States. That's 27 days. So the average small and medium-sized business has 27 days to cover the operating of cash in hand to cover operating expenses. And so if all of a sudden they're hit by an unexpected tariff increase on materials that they need to produce, then that's something they have to figure out how to respond to very quickly. On the other hand, large companies that are well capitalized can kind of spend some more time to really attend to some of these other levers, really thinking long term. Do I need to, create more locations, subsidiaries in Vietnam or in Southeast Asia? Are there strategies, for example, like either doing some assembly in a different location? Some companies we've seen in our research actually do something that's less palatable, which is tariff circumvention by just kind of rerouting goods through third countries that aren't facing as high tariffs as China, which obviously is against the rules and sometimes comes to bite them back when the Customs and Border Protection looks into the transactions and says, this looks a little funny. But other companies, large companies are able to really think about these levers in a more holistic way, whereas small companies kind of have to rely, for example, on customs brokers that can help them to figure out sourcing, like what other alternative sources of inputs could you get? Which other countries are we seeing that from our other clients have been successfully able to reduce their costs in the face of changing tariff policy? So those are some of the key differences in how small and large businesses are faring right now in this dynamic environment.
It's really
I'd like to add to that as well. And use the specific word, use respond. And I think this is more semantics than anything else, but irrespective of how large the company is, what I always ask my team to do when they come to me with a crisis is I ask them, is this a reaction or is this a response, right? So a reaction is cause, instinctive response without any planning, without the right data. A response should have a foundation in data, it should have a foundation in facts, and it should be driven by a strategic direction. The challenge is always going from reaction to response in a timely manner. This is where the difference between a large organization and a small organization is very prevalent. In large organizations, decision-making is centralized.
Yes.
So specifically in highly engineered products or in companies that do a lot of raw material conversion into finished goods, the design decisions required to switch a supplier are exhaustive. In a smaller company where that decision-making is disaggregated and closer to the supplier, closer to the point of production, you can move a lot more quicker. So you've got the balance between smaller companies that technically can be more agile, but larger companies that can throw money at problems and resolve them just through balance sheets and bank accounts.
Mm-hmm. No, it's a really great point. And I love that idea of responding versus reacting.